You are now listening to the Supply Chain Secrets Podcast with Brian Most and Don Davis.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Brian Most, SVP of Retail Strategy at NYSHEX and former VP of Supply Chain at Walmart.
And I'm Don Davis. I'm the Senior Vice President of Carrier Strategy here at NYSHEX and former executive of Hapag-Lloyd and CMA CGM.
And we're back again with our podcast, Supply Chain Secrets. Don and I have a very special guest today. It's Mr. Jeremy Haycock. Jeremy is the latest addition to the NYSHEX team and has joined the company as Managing Director for Europe. Now, for some of you, Jeremy won't be a stranger since he's held various leadership roles at the Maersk Group across Europe, North America, and Asia. And most recently, he was the Managing Director for the UK and Ireland. Jeremy, welcome to NYSHEX and the show.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Awesome. Well, that was a bit of an intro, but for those that maybe don't know you as well, could you just start, give a bit of your background and how you got to this point in your career? It'd be great for them to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in brief terms, I've spent 35 years with Maersk, and those 35 years have really taken me all over the world. Spent a lot of time in Europe, and most recently in Europe, spent a lot of time in Asia. And I've also been fortunate enough to spend 11 years in the United States covering North America. 35 years with one company is a long time, but I actually, during the last 37 years or so, managed to spend a little bit of time outside the company in Charlotte, in North Carolina, where I joined a chassis leasing company called DCLI for nearly a couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. And I think at some point, my first experience with you, Jeremy, was, I would say, sometime in 2017, and it was through NYSHEX. And maybe you could give a little background as far as your experience with NYSHEX and your involvement with the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it actually goes back quite a few years, Don. I remember Gordon Downs coming to me actually 6 years ago and suggesting he had a great idea for starting a new company and wanted to get my input and subsequently my support in starting up the company. And it was such a great idea that I had to say, hey, I think you're onto something here, and I think we really should look further into that. And the upshot of it, of course, was NYSHEX and getting NYSHEX started, which I was fortunate enough to play a little part in, and subsequently actually became part of the board. And in fact, for a number of years, I was the chairman of NYSHEX in the early years.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think NYSHEX brings an interesting perspective to the industry, and just thinking about, the industry as a whole, I think a lot of things have changed. But I also think that there's some areas that haven't changed as much as we've seen these types of innovations in the industry. I think there's a lot of focus on track and trace. There's different things happening in the industry, like blank sailings. I think over the past 2-3 years have become more prevalent. But there's other components of the industry which have really stayed the same. In your view and your experience, what are those things that have stayed the same, and what things in that arena that stayed the same really need to change?
Yeah, well, I think that sort of brings me on to really why I had a great belief in NYSHEX, because it's addressing one of the biggest things that need to change and really still has not changed, at least not to the extent that one would hope for. And that is reliability. Reliability in the broadest possible terms of that word. Of course, we're struggling right now in the whole industry with schedule reliability and so forth. But there's also a big reliability gap when it comes to reliable contracting, the ability to trust what you sign up for from both sides of the equation. Reliability is also a big challenge when it comes to getting your goods shipped when you think you're going to get your goods shipped, which ultimately plays back to the whole contracting challenge. That is a problem that I know NYSHEX is trying to address, and it's a problem that really needs addressing, because everybody loses efficiency through that lack of ability to trust what it is you think that you have signed up for.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And if we could dive into that a little bit deeper, because I think that this problem really stems from some of the behavior that's happened in the industry over time. And some of that behavior has been that people not honoring their contracts for whatever reason. And I think part of this has been driven from the low margins that rate carriers have had historically. I mean, never mind the past year, because obviously things have changed. But I think that behavior came from, in my view, survival from the carriers, because they really had to optimize their costs. They really had to maximize revenue. And sometimes that caused them to make tough decisions. And on the other side, shippers had the opportunity to change carriers without much risk of penalty or some sort of blowback from the carrier if they made those changes, because they were chasing the lowest cost, and carriers would behave that way. Do you agree with that assessment, or what's your view on some of the root causes of the behavior that we've seen over the past 10, 15 years?
Well, I think some of the root causes probably come from the fact that if you imagine how the whole market has really developed and gone, and it's been up and down over the years, and suboptimizing in individual trades by the carriers, taking advantage of a weak market by the shippers. Everybody has tried to optimize, and there's always been a good reason why reliability in contracting has not been at the forefront of people's minds, and that's disregarding some of the consequences of that. And we all know how much waste there is in the market in general. And I know NYSHEX have calculated some huge numbers: $23 billion lost every year by pure waste. And that's waste that is not just wasted in money terms, but this has also an environmental challenge that has been playing into to this whole inefficiency in the industry. So I completely agree that has been a challenge. It's been a challenge for many years, and it's a challenge that I think can only be addressed by the desire by companies like NYSHEX, but also by a desire from the shippers, the forwarders, the carriers, to really want to address this major problem. And I think there's an opportunity right now to do that, because right now, yes, the market has swung very much in favor of the carriers from a financial perspective, but at the same time, we're clearly also seeing that the carriers are fully aware of the fact that supply oversupply or lack of supply and over demand that there is in the market, it's not going to last forever. So everybody wants everything to stay at an even level for the future. And I think that's why there's a real hope that this can be addressed right now.
Jeremy, one of the things you bring up are all of the stakeholders in this industry that need to come together. I think one of the neat things that NYSHEX has done is it's created an environment, a community where shippers, carriers, NVOs can come together and essentially establish, right, the rules of the road. They could say, how do we want to engage each other? How do we set clear expectations? And then how do we hold each other accountable? And there's also essentially kind of this self-policing where, of course, NICEX as a third party oversees and manages, the exceptions that may come through. But the idea of this standard operating kind of approach across stakeholders, I think, is the real key, right, to trying to manage through these things. And one of the things I've always appreciated about our relationship and working together is that we've always been able to try and, find the common ground between companies. Even when I was at Walmart and you were at Maersk and Damco, we would always, of course, try and look out for our respective companies. But there was always, how do we find the common ground for kind of mutual benefit? And, I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of frustration out there between, shippers and carriers today. I think the feeling that rates are probably at all-time highs and service might be at all-time lows. Obviously you've talked about some of the benefits of NYSHEX and the stakeholders coming together, but maybe from a carrier perspective or a supply chain manager perspective, what are some of the things that you think that carriers are doing right at this point to try and help resolve some of these things?
Yeah, and clearly, clearly carriers are painfully aware of the challenges that are being faced right now, and therefore they are trying to address it. The problem they are facing is that because of COVID-19, to a very large extent, as we speak right now, it is a situation where you don't know where the next problem is going to come from, whether it is a ship stuck in the Suez Canal, whether it is a port that gets overly congested and you need to divert because of, recently we saw some big challenges in China around an outbreak that happened there. In Europe, we're seeing some significant challenges in a number of main ports that are creating big problems for the shipping lines to really be able to create some reliability in their schedules. The things that I think a lot of them are looking at is taking out some of the buffer, putting in a lot more buffer. A lot of the schedules are very highly strung. They are very, very tight. And any small mishap in the past would cause delays in the schedule. We are seeing much bigger mishaps right now occurring because of the global situation that we're facing. And let me just elaborate a little bit on what the consequences of that is. We are seeing a massive change globally right now in terms of logistics and managing logistics and logistics strategies being set up. The simplest one that I can mention is clearly the just-in-time principle that so many shippers or importers and exporters have been working towards in the past. It's being replaced by just in case, because there is no reliability out there that you cannot rely on very much today. So you have to build in buffers, and that's creating a whole new scenario that all the carriers also have to take into account when they're trying to forecast. And forecasting is the root cause for many of the problems. The lack of forecast and the lack of ability to forecast is a big problem right now. And I think that is what the carriers are trying to address. They need to be able to rely on at least that the cargo they think is going to arrive is actually going to arrive and is going to be shipped at the time they expect. And really the situation is, of course, unsustainable for all involved. And there's little doubt that there will be more volatility in the future. But I think there will also be some kind of correction, which I think nobody just wants to get caught out on. So it's trying to forecast what's going to happen into the future, whether you're a shipper, a forwarder, or a carrier. That is the big challenge right now. And again, we just need some kind of stability around that.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. And as you said, right, I mean, forecasting and some of these issues are all stakeholders that have to get better at doing it and find a way to communicate and share information in a meaningful way, right? That the other party can use to prepare and improve the service offerings. But you're right, there's going to continue to be disruptions. And I think, again, the neat thing about what the NYSHEX environment has created is there's clarity at how those issues get resolved, right? And if there's something that happens that the group hasn't faced yet, you've got these members that come together, and a member council that say, hey, we haven't encountered this one yet. Let's collectively get together. Let's talk through what the right way to deal with this is, and then make that part of the operating procedures. To your point, then, when there's clarity around how situations are going to be dealt with, then you can plan, and then you can accommodate, some of your strategies or thoughts around it. And once you start to take risk out, and once you start to have clarity, then you can get back to what you were saying around, how do you take some of that buffer out? Because both for carriers and shippers, the cost of that is enormous. Yeah. And I think when we do, come out of this correction, there's going to be a point where people have stopped scrambling just for sheer capacity and start to get back to the reliability and predictability components that allow them to start to lean out their supply chains again. We've talked a lot the last couple of shows about things happening in the Trans-Pacific trade, and certainly that dominates a lot of the conversation. But we're really excited about Europe. I'd love for you to just share with our listeners, what's the European market look like right now, and what are some of the challenges you think that are being faced that NYSHEX might be able to help with?
Well, the easy answer to that question is going to be take a look at the challenges that are being faced in the United States, and you'll see a true copy of what the challenges are in Europe right now. It's very, very similar. we are seeing huge issues with capacity for cargo, especially coming into Europe from Asia, but in fact also capacity going out of Europe. We are seeing containers sitting in all the wrong places around the world, which has the same kind of result in terms of what the impact is to the customers of the carriers. And as I mentioned before, we are just seeing an enormous shift in terms of how the importers and exporters are trying to manage their supply chains in a different way, and trying to reinvent themselves and trying to come up with new strategies to be able to deal with these challenges. And we are seeing actually consequences of some of everything that's happened. Is not only that the carriers are doing a number of things, but we're also seeing shippers trying to secure more space from carriers than needed, just to have some buffer in there, and that in turn has meant that carriers are suffering from downfalls and an inability to really forecast accurately. We in fact have seen examples, despite everything going on, of vessels leaving Asia with open capacity because they have simply, been expecting cargo that didn't arrive. So Europe is facing a lot of those challenges, but it's really hurting, and all parties are really hurting. And forget about financials for a moment, but in terms of managing, forecasting, and for the shippers and importers, the consequences are indeed empty shelves. It's factory shutdowns. It is people losing their jobs. It is serious consequences of the challenges the industry is facing.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I can imagine the frustration when a ship doesn't sail full from Asia, given all the demand. But it's just, again, as you say, fall downs are prevalent. They've been part of the industry for a long time. But I think there is some good news, and I think the industry is changing. You mentioned that shippers are trying to change. I think carriers are trying to change too. I think we're seeing more innovation with carriers, that they're starting to think about two-way committed contracts. So I think it's great to see that some carriers are starting to create their own products as far as two-way committed contracts are concerned. I think that's something, obviously we're trying to solve as well. But I think in terms of adoption, it helps when both parties, when both carriers, shippers, companies like us are trying to drive this forward, because I think that's the only way that this is going to happen, as long as there's choices that shippers have in terms of, okay, this is what carrier solution looks like, this is what NYSHEX solution looks like, or is this something I don't even want to do? Do I want to stick with my traditional contract? But my sense is that there is a drive towards change, and I think these type of committed contracts help solve that problem of fall down, and then eliminate that waste that's created when a ship sails empty. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a big need right now for more trust between parties. And at the end of the day, everyone's needs and needs and will benefit from a clear mutual commitment. It's good for everybody, which is what's so wonderful about this product. This is not a one-sided product that is only benefits one side of the equation. It benefits everybody. There's good efficiencies, you get reliability, and you avoid waste. And everybody needs some kind of predictability that they can have. And one way of achieving that is, of course, to be able to trust on both sides of the equation what you have committed to. And what the other party is committed to. So yes, it addresses a huge problem that I see it exactly the same way as you, Don.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful for shippers to start to think in these terms, right? Because it's very powerful. Bryan and I have talked in a few episodes about being a shipper of choice, and what a company might need to do to be a shipper of choice, and what does that really mean? And, because the word partnership gets thrown around a lot, and usually comes up in the time of a crisis, that, hey, you left my container behind, I thought we were partners. And, there are partnerships, and there's different degrees of partnerships, but really becoming that customer of choice, I think, involves a level of commitment and a level of trust, and starting to innovate and think differently. And I think part of that is, and from a carrier, to me, it's gold when a shipper says, I'm going to commit, I'm going to deliver 100 TEUs a week, 50 TEUs a week, because now I have a predictability there. Maybe there's an option to take more, But the more shippers can do that, I think there's more benefits for carriers.
100%. And let me put it this way: I'm guessing that most carriers are looking at who are their shippers that they believe are actually going to deliver what they said they're going to deliver. Who are the ones they can count on? And of course that works both ways too.
Well, and I think carriers know, right? I mean, my experience at a carrier was that we always had these fall down reports, and that you would get this and say, hey, this guy's 44% fall down, 50% fall down. And I think that's part of some commodity segments that you just see, that traditionally these low value commodities are typically booking a lot and not necessarily showing up. But it happens in other segments too. And I think that, some of that's structural and some of it's being identified, but really doing something about it and being able to commit. And I think it's really powerful to say, like, hey, if I'm a waste paper shipper, as an example, and I know I've had terrible fall down, but now I'm going to commit. I'm going to deliver at least 100 TEs a week. Really, really powerful for a carrier.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and, the thing that you're talking about, though, is, even inside of, these reports, I mean, now we're having discussions around, based off of data and performance. A lot of times we've had discussions, and Jeremy, you and I have been in quarterly business reviews and things of that nature. And, sometimes even if you have best intentions of setting up metrics and, being attentive to them and keeping track of them, it's just hard, right? I mean, the administrative oversight and, getting the data and having one source of the truth. Sometimes the shipper has, their version, the carrier or the supply chain manager has their version. I think there's something appealing, right, to kind of one version of the truth, all the conversations being rooted in data and facts. So you can just find what's the root cause. It's not necessarily where the issue is on whose side. It's finding that issue. What's the root cause? How do we put some countermeasures in place to avoid it going forward? And, I just wonder if, you think that, now's the time. Is the time right now, say, in Europe, for shippers and carriers to kind of move the conversation from, combative back and forth sometimes, and, I got you this year, you get me next year, to more of this discussion around performance and what can we do together to improve?
Yes, I do think it is the time. Absolutely, Scott, Bryan. I think at the end of the day, we are in a situation right now, as I said before, where everybody's hurting. And that's why this is just absolutely the time for these discussions to take place. And frankly, this is also the reason why I now think it's a really good time for Nicex to enter into Europe, because Nicex has a value proposition that really can benefit all parties and can address some of the challenges that the market is facing. And I know it's very much in favor of the carriers right now, the whole market from a financial perspective, but they are also really struggling because they know that the future is things are gonna change, and stability is something that everybody yearns for. Now it's the perfect time to speak to somebody like Nightshakes, quite frankly, and that's why.
Well, you talk about.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you talk about stability, right? And one of the things we've debated and given perspectives on this show, because quite frankly, a lot of listeners have asked about it, is, the potential value of doing something, a contract or a deal outside of a 12-month cycle or outside of a quarterly cycle, whatever your normal kind of approach to business is there a benefit or a thought to extending that out? And, I'd love your perspective on your opinion on, longer term agreements and, the benefits that may be able to come for both shippers and carriers from that approach, or if you even agree with that approach.
Yeah, I think longer term contracts is going to be something we're going to see more and more of, certainly in Europe, and I would imagine also in North America. And I think there are actually a number of benefits for everybody involved, and the major benefit is, of course, that you have peace of mind. You know what you're going to get, as long as that contract that you enter into, of course, has a two-way commitment attached to it. It's got to be beneficial that that I'm not going to have a problem 18 months, 20 to 24 months out into the future. Whereas today, of course, the majority of the contracts are or the vast majority, 99% of contracts are up to for a maximum of 1 year. And of course, that is one of the main factors behind some of the big volatility that drives fluctuations in freight rates, which nobody's really too happy about at the end of the day, because what are you going to tell your board about the future if you don't really know where the market's going? Carriers can't forecast and budget with adding capacity because they don't really know how much cargo they're going to have, and the whole wheel just keeps turning. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a benefit if we start seeing longer term contracts in the market in general. It's going to benefit everybody, as long as they are committed contracts, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree. So can you talk a little bit about, I mean, you're now part of NYSHEX, right? So that's really exciting, and it's great to have you on the team. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to join NYSHEX? Because I think it's really exciting, and it'd probably be pretty interesting for our listeners to hear how you came through that decision to join us at this point.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Don, that I've had a lot of people ask me, so hang on a moment, you're sitting in this job as managing director for the UK and Ireland, pretty much a dream job. What on earth are you thinking? So, and my answer is quite clearly that I have an opportunity here to make a difference, and I think I can join a company that really can make a difference, and primarily can address a real big need that there is in the market, one that hasn't been addressed in the past to a sufficient extent, and hasn't been addressed at all in Europe. I think we have a value proposition that really is something that is worth working for. I think it's just super exciting bringing something new to the market. I'm not too old to go into the digital world, where I think we somehow belong, at least. And this is an opportunity, as I say, to join someone who is at the forefront of innovation in the market, and I want to be part of that. That's exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it's great to hear you say that, because I think Bryan and I have now been here for almost a year now. It's hard to believe it's been a year, but I think we share that excitement. I think it's been a lot of fun. It's been really cool to see the kind of growth and adoption we've had. And it's really neat to see how excited people are, especially after they have that experience. It's one thing to talk about it as a concept, but it's another thing to have a contract and then see it perform. And to get that reaction from customers where they're really excited about this. It's really been a fun journey, I think, for both Bryan and I.
That's great to hear, Don. And I'll say one more thing, and that is, it's such a great product. I don't want you guys in North America to be the only ones who have access to it. We need to get it in Europe too.
I love it. I mean, this is the fun part of what we're doing. As Don said, we've been at this for a year now, he and I. We've seen some amazing adoption, and we're getting the chance now to start to tell some of those customer stories on the podcast and on our website and things of that nature, because quite honestly, I think it's actually hard for even some people to believe, right? How in the world, in this freight market, as chaotic as things are, how could a shipper and a carrier actually come together, make a mutual commitment to move freight, negotiate a price, and the freight move and the price stay the same? I think it's just almost too hard for people to believe. And so, telling some of these customer stories, talking about the motivations as to why it works and why people are actually doing it in this market, it's just a story that needs to be told. And again, I think we're all happy to help you, tell that story in Europe, and hopefully people are going to get excited as well. Can you just talk about, how people are going to be able to find NYSHEX, where maybe we're going to start with a first office, and just kind of what the plan is for the back half of the year?
Yeah. So obviously, like with any company, you've got to make a strong strategy for how do we get going. And in many ways, although of course NYSHEX exists today in North America, it is very much like starting a brand new company when we open up in Europe. What we're going to do, Bryan, is we're going to start off in the UK. I'm based in the UK right now. There are many interesting markets in Europe, so it's not that we have any preference, but we do think that we need to start somewhere, and UK is the place. So what we're going to do is we're in these COVID-19 times, virtual working or working remotely is become the new norm. And we're going to start out with a remote office setup. So when I hopefully soon we'll get some new colleagues here. They'll be based somewhere in the UK, most likely, potentially outside of the UK, but most likely in the UK. And we'll get things up and running. We need to get our agreements in place with the carriers, and that will be a big part of what we will be working on over the next few months. But also we are looking for some shippers or forwarders who may be excited to be some first movers in Europe on the Nicex model, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest for that. So I'm more afraid that I'm going to be too busy, too much that I can handle, than I'm afraid of not getting business. There's such a demand for this model that's probably going to be my biggest concern. I'm not going to be afraid that I don't know what I'm going to be doing with my days. That's for sure.
That's really exciting, and it's great to hear. And Bryan and I can attest to that journey. I think in the year that we've been here, the company has changed a lot. We've grown a lot, and it's really exciting to be part of that. So having said that, Bryan and I have been here for a year. Now's probably a good time to open it up to you to ask us questions, because you're just starting at NYSHEX, and we've been here for a while. Is there anything you want to ask us? It's your chance to play podcaster, and you can ask us questions now. Is there anything that you'd like to either ask myself or Bryan about our experience or what we've seen or our journey so far?
Well, that is exciting, Don. I hadn't prepared myself for that question, but that makes it even better. Well, I'll tell you what. My first question would be to you would be, what has been the single biggest challenge, in your opinion, in terms of ensuring that people understand what the Nicex model is really all about, and what is it that Nicex can do for our customers?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And let's just say that there is a challenge, because I think when NYSHEX started, NYSHEX was operating in one way. They were more of a spot or forward type of solution. And now that we've gone into this contracting type of solution, there's just a lot of misconceptions. And I think the biggest challenge is that people have some idea about NYSHEX, and a lot of those ideas are incorrect. As an example, I've had people say to me, like, so you're an NVO. Like, no, we're not an NVO. We're not buying the space at all. People have said, okay, how much capacity do you have available? Like, no, we don't have the capacity. We simply act as a party between the agreement that you have as a shipper and as a carrier, and we then make sure those terms are clear to both parties, and then we monitor the performance, and then we flag exceptions and things like that. So it's about contracting, exception management, performance. These are the types of things we do. But there's all kinds of misperceptions, I think. And, who knows where these things come from. But I think from the initial start of a conversation, it takes some time to unpack all these things and help people understand what it is that we actually do. Because despite, our podcast, despite all the marketing things we do, despite all the demos, there's still, I think, a misperception. And I would say at least, 2-3 times a month, I run into somebody who says one of these fallacies about NYSHEX, and we can correct it, but it's just interesting. It's like, gosh, we're doing so much stuff, but still these things exist, and it's just overcoming that challenge. I wish there was an easier way for everyone just to understand what we do, because I think the adoption would be accelerated.
And then, Jeremy, I'd pick it up from there. Even when customers understand the role we could play as a neutral third party in, their relationship with their carrier in themselves, and help put a performance-based structure in place, and help them manage all the administrative burden that we talked about earlier that's so hard. There's still this idea, especially from a shipper's perspective, that there's skin in the game for them too now. They love the idea of holding the carrier accountable and, wanting to penalize them or incentivize them for good performance or poor performance. But now the shipper has to understand, like, now there's skin in the game for me too. And the idea of, having to put up collateral on both sides to truly say there is skin in the game if something shouldn't go, the way it was supposed to, or one side didn't do what was expected. Now, the great thing is the default rates are extremely low, right? People typically enter these agreements because they want to perform and they want to improve. But there's still this idea of saying, okay, now I've got my head around the fact that there is skin in the game. Now, how do I apply this to my business? And so we've spent a lot of time working with shippers, helping them imagine all the ways that they could apply committed deals to their benefit of their network, and how to bring reliability and predictability, focusing in on, the primary, lanes that they move business, focusing on the key seasonal needs that they may have, whatever their pain points are, or maybe it's just long-term risk mitigation or diversification strategies. There's all kinds of reasons as to why shippers and carriers can enter into these agreements, and so it's taken some time to figure out, for each individual customer, how do I get the highest return on predictability and reliability, and minimize my risk of default or non-performance. And it's been fun doing it because we've gotten to get to know some amazing customers along the way. But I would just tell you that's been one of the things we've spent a lot of time on, but with really good result.
Thanks.
If I can add to that too, I think one of the things that I observe is that I think, first of all, people recognize that the industry needs to change. But I think the hard part is change is difficult, right? It's always easy to point to somebody else and say like, aha, I know what they need to do differently. But then when you look at yourself or your own company and say, this is what we need to do differently, it can be a challenge. There's some uncertainty attached to that. But I think the neat thing about what we're doing is we're helping people do this. We're helping people get through it. And it's clear that you need help to do this. It's not easy. You can't just say like, aha, yeah, two-way committed, I'm going for it, because your contract might have been 10,000 TEUs and you're not even sure where you were underperforming, which lanes, et cetera. And we can see that there's a benefit to helping customers understand how they can do this, and making it easier for them to say, okay, I see. All right, we're setting up these contracts for success. There's no ambition to set anybody up for failure, and that's why you see the low default rates that we have.
Great. Do I get to ask another question?
Absolutely.
Of course.
Fantastic. What's the coolest thing about Nicex?
Besides Bryan, I think I mean, if I could take that question first, I guess. I think it's part of being part of a digital company. I mean, I think we're doing a lot of things differently. You're exposed to a lot of different things. I mean, I think working with product teams, as an example, and seeing how they want to solve problems, how they go about creating products that actually solve problems, and really listening to the voice of the customer. And there's all kinds of different tools that, I mean, I probably would have never been exposed to on the carrier side, whether that's Basecamp, Miro, Slack. There's all these tools that we're using, and I'm not going to throw them all out there to scare you because you probably haven't seen them all yet. But it actually is a very efficient way for a company to work, a product company to work. And, being on the carrier side, carriers had worked in one way for a long time. Being part of a product company, a technology company, things are done a bit differently. And for me personally, I have learned a ton in the year I've been here. And that's really neat. And I think it's been probably the coolest part of what I've been doing. What about you, Bryan?
Yeah, no, I would agree, Don, with all those things. And then what you said earlier, Jeremy, being part of a purpose or a mission-driven organization. The people that have come to NYSHEX have kind of come from all backgrounds, and it's really exciting to see this collection of diverse talent come together, who have all said, yeah, I was perfectly happy with what I was doing, or I had a great career, but, there was just something missing, this ability to again, impact change in a positive way. And so to be with a collection of people like-minded that come to work every day trying to make a positive impact for something bigger than themselves has been a lot of fun. And then the creativity that we have to actually go out and make it happen. I mean, it's a wonderful environment, a wonderful culture of innovation and creativity. I mean, this podcast is one of the examples. I mean, we didn't plan to do a podcast. It just was something that grew right out of an idea and feedback from customers and internal colleagues that we should try it. And here we are. And so, those are just examples of things that are just been a lot of fun to be creative And again, it's all for the purpose of trying to help, this industry move forward. And to your point earlier, there's a huge opportunity to move it forward collectively as a group of stakeholders. And this is the best place I can see to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could just add to that too, I think everyone's moving in the same direction at NYSHEX. We're all trying to move towards the same thing. And I think being on the carrier side, that there are departments which come in conflict with each other. And it's just by the nature of what they have to do. Operations, they're trying to reduce cost. Trade is trying to fill the ship at the highest rate possible. Sales is trying to satisfy their customer and get new business from their customer. And all these things don't always work together in the same way, right? It's like, why do you want to do that? That's going to increase my cost. Okay, I have to optimize the ship, so it's going to affect your customer. So there's these things that come in conflict because of what those departments are trying to do. And it's nothing sinister by anyone's motives or anything. It's just the nature of the business that these departments are moving in their direction, which can come in conflict with another department. I think in our world, we're all moving in the same direction. We're all building a product and a solution that's trying to solve this issue, which is really neat to see, is that you just don't see those kinds of things here, because just by the design of the company, which I didn't really think about until I was used to, departments you have to kind of like fight internally to get your customer on board and things like that. And here there isn't really that type of fighting. There's discussion and debate. We share a lot of different ideas, but at the end of the day, we're all moving in the same direction, and it's really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, and I imagine, it was funny because, having been away from NYSHEX for a few years, I guess, and obviously trying to follow things from a distance, when I suddenly saw a lot of names that I recognized who had joined NYSHEX, and I thought, wow, some pretty exciting people have decided to join. And I called up Gordon and said, Gordon, how the hell did you get all these people to join, yourselves included? And I guess you just answered that question for me.
Yeah, it's been a terrific journey, and it's been a lot of fun. The first year's been a lot of fun, and I'm pretty sure the next year is going to be even more fun.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to being a big part of that, I hope.
All right, great. Well, I think that wraps up the show. So, Jeremy, thanks a lot for coming on. And for our audience, thanks for listening. Don't forget, rate us, review us, hit that like button wherever you find our show, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcast. Thanks, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Supply Chain Secrets Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast network.